Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mauve Coaching Podcast, where we discuss all things health and fitness, emotional and mental well-being, travelling, career chats, just life in general, to be honest, the good, the bad, the ugly, and absolutely everything in between. This is episode 5 and I'll be chatting to you about body image. Now, this at the best of times is an extremely important topic to discuss anyway, no matter what time of the year, but especially as we lead into the festive period. Like, it's December 2nd today, and I know for many of you this is something that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis, or maybe just sporadically. Maybe it depends on various factors, which I will discuss in this particular podcast. However, it's extremely pertinent to me as well and what I've been going through as of late, and therefore I think it's extremely relevant to talk about. So because of this, and it being an extremely relevant topic to me personally, and because of the time of year that we're in, I thought there'd be no better time to discuss it than now. So firstly, I want to chat to you about my personal experience, because I think that kind of is a natural segue into how I'm dealing with it currently. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a perfect human being. Very much good at giving advice when it comes to improving your body image to my clients, my friends. Not the best at taking it. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches can relate to. We're very good at helping other people on their own journeys, but sometimes it's very easy to let your own mental health slip along the way because your focus is on helping other people. So I think that's partially why, especially in the last few weeks, I have neglected somewhat my own mental and emotional well-being. And I've definitely felt the effects of it as we lead into the Christmas period, which I know is a very joyful time of year for many, but can also be a very triggering time for a lot of people too. And I'll hold my hand up and say it. It has been in the past a very triggering time for me for many reasons. And I know that there's many factors at play. One being food, of course, alcohol, lack of sleep from going out more often than you'd normally go out, all of the above and more. So at the very least, I want to offer tips and tricks to help you in the short term and ideally transform your mindset in the long term to improve your life, your perspective of yourself and your body for the better. So as a kid, I was always super lean, and I think I've discussed this before. Genetics played a significant role in that. So I was always very narrow, was a very active child, very fast metabolism, and you know, around the time when you start to notice appearance, I think that kind of starts to happen at different ages for different people. But I remember for me, at a very young age, I experienced a loss of friendship purely because of how I looked and how my body essentially was making my friend at the time feeling less worthy or lesser because we had different body types. And this was at the time when skinny and being skinny and lean and thin was glorified by the media. So I remember at a young age experiencing that and believing that my sense of self-worth and what I offered and what I brought to the table boiled down to my appearance and how I looked and how lean or small I was. And that was, in hindsight, reflecting on it, definitely the starting point for me, my poor body image growing up. Because from then onwards, I became quite fixated on how skinny I was. This was also at a time, as I said before, when the thigh gap was very much glorified by the media. Also, the belief that I was not worthy unless a specific individual validated me and saw me or deemed me as desirable. And this is something I've talked about before, how your sense of self-worth and what you believe you bring to the table should never be based on other people's perceptions of you, which is a very volatile source, I guess, of who you are, in the sense that you're not going to be secure in yourself and what you bring to the table, not just physically, like in terms of your appearance, but also your personality. When you walk into a room, the sense of security and confidence that you exude, that will in itself also be negatively impacted if you derive your sense of self-worth, as I said, from other people's perceptions of you, which should always come from within. And as I touched on before in my personal health and fitness journey episode, in recent years, my shift has since focused for a long time to that of one of becoming stronger. But it's been a journey. Even as of recent as the last 2 years, say, I was extremely sensitive, unknowingly, to other people's comments about me. And this is why I talk about the relevance of this to Christmas period, because obviously you're going to be surrounded by family members that maybe you're not always seeing, you're not used to being surrounded by them. It's a very intense environment, let's say. And with that can come a more critical eye, essentially, especially if you haven't seen people in a long time. Sometimes people, especially family members, because of that level of closeness, can feel very comfortable in just being very upfront with you, whether or not their intentions are good or not. They can almost knock you down by making passive comments or even direct comments about your appearance, your weight, whatever it may be. And I'm a very sensitive person, and I'm never going to apologize for that, because it's actually one of my strengths when used appropriately. Obviously, it can be my downfall if I'm not taking care of myself and setting boundaries and, validating myself and my sense of self-worth. But in the past, other people's comments, they took their toll on me. I'm not even going to bring them up because there's no point, but people would comment on my weight. I would be in tears. Yeah, comments about my weight really, really affected me and my perception of myself. And when I started shifting from, as I said, the focus from being skinny to one of growth, glute growth became a massive focus for me, because it was what I truly believed at the time would make me feel worthy. Once again, deriving my sense of self-worth from how I looked and how I perceived others to think of me. So any remark on, say, the size of my ass, that would really, really affect me. And some comments I still hold to this day, and I catch myself thinking them when I look at myself in the mirror. And I even said something the other day, and my friend was like, Mauve. And I was like, oh, here we go. So no one's perfect. I do catch myself sometimes being quite hard on myself and not seeing all the incredible strength gains that I've made mentally and physically. So, I might still not be happy, say, with my glute growth, and it's something I'm on a journey with now, because I'm finally eating enough, I'm finally training hard enough. But for years, even when I wasn't happy with my glutes, I was completely disregarding all the incredible wins that I had. So I developed a strong upper body, shoulders, back, hamstrings, quads, but I completely overlooked them because of what I thought to be flaw. And that kind of comes from the fact that I am a perfectionist, and I have a very critical eye, as I discuss about on this pod a lot. So I can kind of hone in on the negative. The main takeaway, I guess, from this phase of my life would be that I wish I had established stronger boundaries with those closest to me in terms of the unsolicited comments that they would make, say, on my appearance, my eating habits, my food, whatever it may be, anything related to my food intake and my body image. Because don't underestimate the ability of your mind to be permeated by other people's passing comments, remarks about you. Because your brain is like a sponge. It just takes in everything, especially at a young age, but even not then, even just as an adult, we do take on board other people's thoughts about ourselves, whether we realize it or not, subconsciously or consciously. It permeates our minds, and it can rewire your thought processes about yourself for the worse. Fast forwarding to now, so I would say my most significant growth mentally, physically, emotionally, everything, as I've discussed before, has been within this last year, if I'm being completely honest with you. In saying that, the last 2 to 3 weeks I have been struggling. Not on a day-to-day basis, depends on the day, depends on the phase of my cycle, which I'll chat on now. But I've found myself been really taken aback by the ruminating thoughts I've had about myself, not on a day-to-day basis, but quite regularly over the last few weeks. And that's why I thought it would be a good idea to talk to you guys about it now while it's topical for me. So as I said on one of my recent Instagram posts, I am currently sitting at my heaviest body weight. So that is both in the sense of my muscle mass as well as my body fat percentage. And that has been a journey to come to terms with, because while that's been very much the intention, so I actually it's It's been 3 months now. I have been intentionally trying to bulk, and I say bulk because bulk with quotation marks, because I'm in Bali, and as I've said before, being a vegetarian or pescatarian in my case, and bulking, oof, it's hard. But I have managed to do it because I've been very intentional with it. However, while I am extremely proud of myself, which I'll touch on now as being a way of coping with the bad body image days, for gaining this weight, because I needed to gain this weight, both mentally, physically, emotionally, everything. It's hard. I was saying to my friend just before I came in here today that, you know, when you go on your phone and you swipe down to like search an app or something, and then it thinks you're looking for a photo and it brings up old photos of you. Recently that's been happening a lot for me, of old photos of me, like even as recent as 6 months ago, when I was much leaner, I guess you could say, body fat percentage wise, but I had significantly less muscle tissue. And it's quite triggering because I haven't really suffered with bad body image in the last while, and I think it's because I've made such a big transformation physically recently, as I said, intentionally. It doesn't make it any easier in terms of getting used to it. You have to be very intentional with minding your head and validating yourself and catching yourself in these ruminating negative thoughts. So how I've dealt with that for me personally is that when these negative ruminating thoughts crop up, I notice them. I let myself feel them, because a lot of the time in the first few weeks as well, I was suppressing them. I was just like, I don't have time to be feeling negative right now. I have too much to do and I don't want to feel right now. But especially this last week, which has been chaotic, I have really noticed the toll it has been taking on me mentally, physically, everything. I've been feeling exhausted, really sensitive, and therefore more susceptible to letting these negative ruminating thoughts take over. And even in just the last week, I've been really trying to intentionally practice noticing when these negative ruminating thoughts crop up and letting myself feel into them, yes, but then also reminding myself just how far I've come. So as I said before, I struggled to put on weight. My goal was to put on weight. How freaking incredible is it that I was able to get to this point? For someone who struggled for so many years to gain muscle tissue, to put on a bit of healthy weight, it just makes me appreciate my body and what it does for me so much more when I look at it from that perspective. And this is largely stemming from the work that I put in earlier this year. So when I started doing mindfulness practices, breathwork techniques, restorative yoga in particular, journaling, all these healthy coping mechanisms that helped me regulate my nervous system, essentially shifting from being in a chronic fight or flight state, which is when your sympathetic nervous system is activated or triggered, to that of one of living more in a rest or digest state, so when your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, which is ideal. And that in itself has got me to a point where I'm able to put on the weight because my gut health is no longer out of whack, digestive system is working as it should, and therefore the food I'm eating is being absorbed appropriately. So even when I was eating load of protein before, I wasn't reaping the benefits of it because of that chronic fight or flight state, meaning that my stress levels, my cortisol hormone was coursing through me on a day-to-day basis from the moment I'd wake up to the moment I'd go to sleep at night. And therefore I wasn't able to put on weight. If anything, as I said, I lost 10 kg accidentally, which is a worrying amount of weight to lose at the best of times, but especially without intention. So it's times like that when I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm like being hard on myself, I'm noticing myself talk to myself negatively, berating myself, and I remind myself, Mauve, when you look back on those photos of yourself when you were leaner, what do you see? I see a girl who on the outside looked the part, but I know what the girl on the inside was feeling. She felt so low, so unworthy, had no love for herself, was depressed, was unhappy in herself, hated her life, hated herself, essentially. To now, this girl who, don't get me wrong, I have my bad days. Today is a bad day for me. You can probably kind of get that vibe from this pod, and I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I thought I was going to cry because of it. I've had to do some self-regulating breathwork techniques, even just at the start of this podcast, in between little snippets. Been really, really struggling today, particularly with my body image, but also just my general mental and emotional state today. Not great, okay? But overall, I'm the happiest and healthiest and fittest and strongest mentally, physically, emotionally I have ever been in my entire life. Okay, I'm 25 in 2 weeks, which is so exciting. So when you start to take a step back and look at yourself as more than just a body, right? Your body is a vessel for your soul. And when you start looking at yourself less from a 2D perspective, like what you look like, and more about what you are as a whole, what it's really helped me to start to see myself and view myself and my body more neutrally. And don't get me wrong, that's not to say that you shouldn't have body composition goals, okay? I have them. I think a lot of us have a desired physique that we want to be in, be it from a health and fitness perspective or simply from feeling confident in your clothes. But that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how it doesn't start from what you see when you look at yourself in a mirror or in a photo. It starts from within, in your noggin, okay, in your head. So that leads me into the question of how do you go about managing or improving your body image? If you more often than not struggle with poor body image, you first need to understand and realize and recognize that this largely stems from not what looks back at you in the mirror, as I said, or the photos of yourself that you see. It all starts with the relationship you have with yourself, the sense of security that you derive from internal validation or external validation, your susceptibility to taking on other people's negative remarks about yourself or positive remarks, not just the negative, and taking them on as gold and believing them blindly, because your susceptibility to that is what makes or breaks your relationship with yourself. So until you understand that your perception of yourself, be it your identity or your physical appearance, all starts with your internal cognitive processes, you will forever be on this roller coaster, say, with your confidence levels because of your susceptibility to taking on board negative remarks by family members, whether or not they're well intended, not just family members, friends, whoever it may be. It will always be subject to waver, to fluctuate, to change. And you also need to realize that a lot of the time these negative remarks that other people make about you, especially close family members or friends, sometimes or more often than not come from a projection of their own insecurities. So that's ever more a reason to not take on board other people's comments about yourself, because a lot of the time they're not even talking about you. They're talking about themselves, whether they realize it or not. And in order to improve your relationship with yourself, this all comes down to, like I said before, practicing mindfulness, breath work, yoga, anything that makes you feel safe, that helps you improve your relationship with yourself, but also work from deriving your sense of self-worth from your own words to yourself. And this is why I ask my clients every week, how did they talk to themselves, be it negatively or positively? Because it's how we talk to ourselves on a daily basis that we actually learn to believe. If we're speaking to ourselves positively, with compassion, nurturing, saying our I statements every day. So this is something that I even got one of my clients to do recently, is to incorporate I statements into her morning routine or evening routine, and writing them, recording them, playing them in her earphones every morning, every evening, whichever it may be, because you rewire your cognitive processes to believe what you're constantly exposed to. So as I said before, if you're being constantly exposed to negative remarks from family members or friends and you're not establishing those boundaries, those thoughts will permeate your brain and you will start to believe them. However, on the other end of the spectrum, if you're to start or end your day with I statements, incorporated that with butterfly tapping technique, you start to rewire your brain and how you think about yourself. So the likes of that, as well as body positivity, which is like love towards your body, or body neutrality, which is more about not so much about how your body looks and loving it regardless, but more so about loving your body for what it does for you. So taking essentially appearance somewhat out of the equation. And mantras like that, or affirmations, which are completely unique and individual to every person, into your day-to-day routine is honestly life-changing. And it makes sense because, as I said, what you're repeatedly exposed to, you become, or you learn to think that way. Be it thoughts, people, environment, whatever it may be, you become. So why not make that a positive, nurturing environment with compassion, with love, with self-acceptance? Because at the end of the day, we only have ourselves. So why not be there for ourselves like we would a family member or friend? Why not speak to ourselves how we speak to our family members or a friend or partner? Because we have this tendency as human beings to be our own worst critic. However, there's also the case for some people who, generally speaking, have a relatively good body image. However, some days they find it wavering. And this is where I think, once again, knowledge is power, because do not underestimate the impact, for my fellow females, of your menstrual cycle and your hormones on your body image, because that not only affects your moods, so your mental and emotional well-being, but also physically, your body is affected by your menstrual cycle because of the fluctuating hormones, depending on the phase of your cycle. And a prime example of this was just maybe less than 2 weeks ago, just 1 week ago, I was in my late luteal phase, which is just before you're about to menstruate. Men, I am not going to apologize for talking about menstruation on this. I am an online female health and fitness coach, so this is a very pertinent topic to discuss. And if that bothers you, kindly leave. So just in my late luteal phase around a week ago, I was weighing myself for the first time, just out of curiosity, because I wanted to see how much weight I managed to gain in the last few months. Mainly, as I said, muscle mass, but also body fat percentage that was very much needed to increase. And I noticed, so I weighed myself 4 days consecutively, and I fluctuated 3 kilograms across those days. Because of the phase of the cycle that I was in, which, as I said, was my luteal phase, I was holding a lot more water. That's not to say that PMS symptoms should be normalized, because generally speaking, it's not normal to have PMS symptoms. While it is very common, that does not make it normal or healthy. So that means that something isn't working. And I have been very stressed the last few weeks, so that's probably one reason why my hormones have been slightly out of whack. And also another thing to note from my case is that I was on the pill, the contraceptive pill, for 7-8 years, and since last December I went on the copper coil, and it's only in the last few months that my periods have begun to regulate, because I've never had a real period. So there's a couple of factors at play, but that's definitely one for me. So the takeaway from that is to not underestimate the impact of your menstrual cycle, as I said, not just on you physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And this is actually something that I've been helping my clients with, because honestly, it's worrying the amount of us females that don't understand the impact that something that is so huge and such a major part of our lives, how it affects us on a day-to-day basis. So that's something that I've been helping my clients kind of understand, learn more about, because as I said, knowledge is power, ladies. And finally, I guess another few takeaways I would say would be to notice negative thoughts that you're having about yourself and respond with compassion, to not respond to maladaptive coping mechanisms that you might have slipped into or slip into over this festive period with punishment, but with compassion. So if you find yourself binging or restricting, try to shift your focus away from punishing behaviors to ones rooted in compassion. So that might be as simple as drinking your water, eating nutritionally dense foods to feel good from the inside out, not skipping meals, essentially viewing yourself as being worthy of being taken care of by you and only you. That is all from me today, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I will be on the next episode with a guest, which is very exciting. So until then, bye!